The budget handheld category is marred by cheap cash-ins that rarely work as they should. So when Anbernic revealed a follow-up to the, well, let's be honest, very okay RG35XX, I had to check it out. Would this new upgrade make good on the original premise of a solid mid-range super budget vertical retro handheld? Let's find out. You can pick up the base 64GB RG35XX Plus for $60.99, although that price changes depending on how much storage you need. I ended up picking up the RG35XX Plus that comes with the two SD cards, one at 64GB and the second at 128GB, and that cost $78.99. If you're only interested in playing old school retro games like SNES or Genesis, the 64GB model will be more than enough. Those types of games are generally only a few megabytes in size, so filling up a 64GB card is going to take some serious effort. If, however, you want to import a library of PS1, Dreamcast or even PSP games, you're going to need that extra storage. For shipping, I paid the standard delivery, which came to $12, and I had to pay 98 cents for green shipping, meaning the overall total for the device ended up at $110.37. Still fairly cheap then. Is there value in the RG35XX Plus? Undoubtedly. The Miyoo Mini Plus, which the RG35XX Plus is a clone of, is only capable of up to PS1, and even then, PS1 isn't anything special on that device. The RG35XX Plus, on the other hand, is capable of up to PSP. The difference in power here really is night and day. If your main focus is a vertical handheld that offers solid mid-range performance and at a low price, the RG35XX Plus is a solid little upgrade. Build quality overall is solid, but some corners have been cut. The most obvious issue is with the shaky shoulder buttons. On the Miyoo Mini Plus, the shoulder buttons stay firmly in place, but on the 35XS Plus, there's a distinct rattle when you shake the device. It's not enough of an issue for me to regret picking it up, but it's something you are going to be constantly aware of. The one upside of these frequently nervous shoulder buttons is that that's really as bad as this console gets. Almost every other aspect of the RG35XX Plus is an improvement over the Miyoo Mini Plus. The Anbernic device is also slightly longer vertically than the Miyoo Mini Plus, 4.6 inches to the Miyoo Mini's 4.25 inches. That may not seem like much, but the extra 0.35 of an inch really makes a difference, and allows Anbernic to change up how large the different buttons are. All of the buttons, so that's A, B, X, Y, Start, Select, and the D-pad, are a smidgen bigger, and that makes them easier to press. The face buttons do have a longer travel time as a result of this change, but that isn't going to be an issue for 99% of players. What I found interesting is that Anbernic also increased the vertical height of Start, Select and the menu button. On the Miyoo Mini Plus, these buttons only slightly inch out of the case, but on the RG35XX Plus, they're much higher and, like the other buttons, are much easier to hit. The other big change over the Miyoo Mini Plus is the introduction of an HDMI output on the top of the handheld. That feature simply doesn't exist in the Miyoo, so if you want to use the RG35XS as a controller and hook it up to a TV or monitor, that option's there for you. One area I do need to touch on is just how useless those shoulder buttons are. It's not just the rattle that I mentioned, it's that no company has a clue how to implement them in a way that feels intuitive. Although the RG35XX Plus is longer than the Miyoo Mini Plus, it's the same width, meaning there isn't any extra backspace to shove some better triggers. Anbernic has attempted to solve this problem by making the L1 and R1 buttons wider, but pressing them in a fast-paced game like Street Fighter 2 is still an exercise in awkwardness. The general idea here is to use the tips of your index fingers to hit L2 and R2, and the middle of the same fingers to hit L1 and R1. In practice, you'll end up clumsily hitting both buttons by accident. To Anbernic's defense, every vertical handheld right now has this problem, and nobody wants to solve it. And it's maddening. I saw with the Arc D just how great it was having extra buttons on the front of the device. So why companies are stuck to this idea that shoulder buttons need to be on the back is just beyond me. Just stick them on the front, it'll be fine, I promise. Despite being sold as a up-to-PSP device, there's quotation marks around that, Anbernic includes a handful of lightweight PSP titles to create the idea that the RG35XX Plus can play PSP games, but it's simply not powerful enough to run the more complex games like God of War. For those lightweight titles, so think collections or 2D titles, they'll run well. Loco Roco plays at full speed on the device and is only really hindered by those awkward shoulder buttons. If you're after a rough guideline, I'd look at it as fighting games, retro collections and 2D games will work, but anything 3D with a lot going on probably won't. That's not true for every game of course, but it's a good way to come at the RG35XX. It is a shame PSP isn't fully playable on the RG35XX Plus, which really needs a shorter name for when you're having to say it out loud, but price is a huge factor here. The industry isn't at the point yet where PSP and GameCube can work within this price bracket. Maybe in a few years, just not right now. How big of a problem is the lack of PSP support? It all depends on how you look at it. For me, I don't expect a $60 device to offer perfect mid-range performance, so being able to play a smaller amount of PSP titles is still a huge win as far as I'm concerned. What about everything else? Anbernic has switched out the PowerVR SGX 544MP GPU from the original RG35XX and replaced it with the Mali G31MP2. And RAM has also seen an upgrade from 256MB to a more meaty 1GB. What this means in layman's terms is the RG35XX Plus is capable of emulating on a higher level than the original RG35XX. As mentioned, some PSP is possible, as are other systems. Dreamcast especially feels great to play. Frame rates will vary on a per game basis obviously, but everything I've tested feels fluid enough to play and, more importantly, enjoy. Dreamcast games also mostly run in a 4:3 aspect ratio as well, so they look great on the RG35XX Plus's 3.5-inch IPS display. That screen is great as well. Text tends to get a bit illegible due to the size for some reason, but the overall brightness and the colour gamut is stunning. The lack of power inside the device means upscaling isn't really an option as well, but that's to be expected. So to recap, the RG35XX Plus is capable of playing games from Dreamcast and before that, so that'd be Dreamcast, SNES, NES, Master System, Genesis or Mega Drive, Game Gear, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, PC Engine, Neo Geo, and your host of arcade machines. It'll all play some PSP, but that's where the device really taps out. Anbernic operating systems are always basic, and I'm torn on whether that's a good or a bad thing. For people who just want to get into a game and have everything front and center, this custom version of Linux does the job. But for people who are coming from a Steam Deck, Emulation Station, or Daijisho, Anbernic's Linux is bare bones by comparison. The options you've got here are Game Room to select your emulators, a RetroArch console selector, Favorites, Search, History, and the Settings menu, the latter of which lets you test out buttons to see if there's any problems with them or change your icons and wallpaper. It's as basic as they come, but it's worth keeping in mind there are multiple developers who release custom firmwares, like Black Seraph's Onion OS for example. So if you don't like it, give it a few months and chances are you'll be able to replace it with something better. One minor niggle I found is after I purchased my RG35XX Plus, Anbernic released a firmware update that lets you press the power button to switch the D-pad between a virtual D-pad and a virtual analog stick. That to me is great news. On the RG Arc-D in Dreamcast games, I had to manually remap the stick to the D-pad in RetroArch to play the games that used stick movement. Now all you need to do is press a button to switch it. That's pretty cool as far as I'm concerned. So where's the problem? Updating the firmware on the RG35XX Plus isn't done via a download on the machine like it is on PlayStation or Xbox. To install the new update, you'll need to download the latest image and burn it to a microSD card. And yes, that will delete your profile data and settings. It's a convoluted process, and given the RG35XX Plus has Wi-Fi capabilities, it's mad that in this day and age, it needs to be this much effort just to update the system. Really? Come on guys, it doesn't need to be this difficult. For those of you that haven't heard the name RG35XS before, I just wanted to do a quick rundown of what's different with this version and the previous model. I won't bore you with the overly pretentious tech speak, but what you need to know is this new version features a more powerful processor and graphics solution and increases the amount of RAM. The Plus model also includes an extra SD slot, increases the battery capacity from 2600 mAh to 3300 mAh, which is roughly about an extra 20 minutes of playtime, and comes equipped with Wi-Fi. Why does any of this matter? Having an extra SD slot means you can store more games, which is sure to help those of us with massive libraries. The extra battery life is nice, but it's not a massive change. I was still averaging between 5 and 6 hours, which, is perfectly acceptable for a device like this. The main thing here to take note of is the upgrade in power. The original RG35XX wasn't a powerful device. I remember reading Brandon's review on Retro Dodo where he said the device is essentially just a big slab of mediocre, and he was right. The original was fine for the price, but its lack of power made it rather unremarkable. The new Plus version takes the shape and look of the original and packs in a much more power at what is a very budget-friendly price. It won't hold a candle to the likes of the Retro Pocket 4 Pros of this world, but at a fraction of the price, the RG35XX Plus is perfect for newcomers and collectors alike. Here's the thing. The problem with budget retro handhelds is that they're often rushed out to capitalise on a trend without much thought. That's what happened with the original RG35XX. Miu released the Miu Mini Plus, then Anbernic wanted a slice. The RG35XX Plus takes the design of the Miu Mini Plus and this time adds to it. The extra power means Dreamcast on a pocket-sized device is now playable, and that is great. PSP may be lacking when it comes to high-end titles, but the fact a $60 retro handheld can play as many PSP games as it does really shows you just how much effort has gone into making the RG35XX Plus the best it can be. The triggers still suck, and will continue sucking until vertical handhelds start putting the buttons on the front. They're awkward, uncomfortable, and hold the device back from being truly brilliant. But overall, I love the RG35XX Plus. The smaller form factor and longer battery life mean I can actually fit it in my pocket when I'm out and about and travelling, rather than needing a carry case. As much as I love the Anbernic RG, it's not quite pocket sized. I'll leave you with this. Simply put, if you want something that's close to the Game Boy experience but packed full of extra power and at an unbeatable price, the RG35XX Plus comes very easy to recommend. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, and if you'd like to subscribe, that'd be awesome. Until next time, see ya.